Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank you all for coming in tonight, coming in early. I know on the agenda it says 7 p.m. Thank you for coming in for 6. And our next November meeting will also be at 6 p.m. Because these two budget meetings have so much meat to them. We wanted to make sure to not go past the witching hour. So we're doing the best we can to keep everybody able to get home at a reasonable time. Are there any changes to the agenda? Not that we've seen. So we will open up to our first session of public comments. If you could please take a look at the bottom of your agenda. You will see the board voted on norms for our meetings going forward. These very closely align with our policy, which is also linked at the bottom of the agenda. If you're online, you can take a look at that. But these kind of just gave us some common ground to work with. If you wish to speak at our public comments, you do need to use the microphone. It is not an amplifier. It is the way that the online audience can hear us. And that is also necessary for our recordings. So we will open up to our public comments. Our first session will cap it at 15 minutes. We have a second session later, should that be needed. Is anybody in the public present desiring to speak for public comments?
A question or a point of order?
Okay.
So on our expectations and reminders, there's a statement that questions from the community regarding budget line items need to be submitted in writing. Do we have like some pens or paper that people can use for that?
That was part of the intent of giving out the agendas, was to have something people could write on. So
Okay.
I don't have extra pens, but that is part of the hope of that.
Okay, it would be nice if we could do something like that, because I hate to have people who have a question not be able to.
Yeah, so hopefully that with the agenda, the paper, that's a place that people can write those things down, and maybe we can share.
And
our
I've got a
pens
couple
and
of extra
pencils.
pens. If anybody needs a pen to write something, just come up and grab one.
Cool. No public comments at this time? I'm assuming we know we're all here for, so you want to get to the meat, I get it. All right, so we are going to move ahead, and let's go into our matters for information and discussion after, oh, I see what we did, yeah. It didn't say 7 o'clock, excuse me for that. I'm literally looking at the wrong school district. I've got to get my game together. All right. So, we do not have our student representative tonight. We do have our superintendent with us tonight. So, have you got anything for us tonight?
Yes.
Cool.
Refresh, it should come up.
Okay, I'm going to use the presentation anyway because it'll be clearer than the PDF.
Okay.
So just do that. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Good to see you all here this evening, and this is the official kickoff, although we've been talking all year long about budgets and in some way, whether it be issues that we are having this year that we're working on, whether it's funding facilities work out of trust funds, which we have started to do some of the work here at the middle school, high school, and then next week is slated for the Range Memorial School to do some work that's been needed for a couple of years, and the board approved money to be used out of the Maintenance Reserve Trust Fund. So that's ongoing, and the other items that you provided us permission to go forward with, yes?
I think we need to move that back a few feet, because there's three of us who, well, a couple of people who can't really see it.
Okay.
Can we just move it behind
If
the poll?
if you refresh the, well, a couple things. If you refresh on your computer,
Yeah, it's on the
it is
agenda.
linked on there, but it would not be, it would be in a PDF. So you should be able to see that.
Okay, it wasn't there an hour ago. Good,
Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
it wasn't.
Thank you.
Nope. And so it's there. It'd be difficult probably
Okay.
to shift that. Yep.
Yep, good.
But we haven't got past that first slide anyway with the information on it. And so I'll get right into this because I know that we have a longer presentation. I will say that Heather Lindstad was not able to be here tonight. So while I'll talk a little bit about athletics and activities, and we've been doing that anyway along the way with the money and so forth and what the realities are with the budget and going forward, that will have to be saved. Any larger details are going to have to be saved for probably the SAU session instead of this one. But I know that many pieces of that will be alluded to in this presentation. The first major update that I wanted to provide is a legal update, because I do think that this impacts us. This is something that we've been talking about as a school board for 4 to 5 years, and it's the idea of school choice and open enrollment schools. And we talked about the fact, well, it has not become fact yet, but the possibility that New Hampshire would eventually go to a system where school choice would be in place, perhaps universally. With that in mind, we've been actively working toward, and not just for this reason, of course, but certainly we've been motivated to make certain our school system has continuously improved and improved and improved, and that our reputation has been strong. There's good reason for that, because people will choose schools that have those great cultures, which our school district does have, that has good resources, that has good course offerings, lots of, that's current, that's progressive, what have you. We took a couple steps back last year in this effort. It does not help to have publicity that is harmful to a district when everything is so public, and this is a small area of the state, so that if we were to ever become that type of a school, attracting individuals becomes that much more difficult if your reputation isn't stellar. So this is a ruling that happened, this occurred a week and a half ago. There were 2 schools, Pittsfield School District, New Hampshire, did not choose to become an open enrollment school. There's some processes you'd have to go through to choose to do that. That is something that this school district might want to have some conversation about when we get to warrant articles and things of that nature this year. If you want to read more about this, you can go to Justia US Law. You can Google appeal of Pittsfield School District, and there is a lot of information there. It's an interesting read. I actually haven't read everything. I've skimmed through it all, and I was briefed on it. So another school, Prospect Mountain, had become an open enrollment school. Some students from Pittsfield School District applied and were accepted to Prospect Mountain School. Prospect Mountain School charges Pittsfield School for the tuition, which I believe was 80% of Pittsfield's tuition rate, which is quite a bit. I think it was between 2 and 4 students had gone over there. Pittsfield did not believe that it needed to pay. They had not chosen to become an open enrollment school. How could another school district force them to pay because their school board had chosen, or community had chosen to do that? This went to the New Hampshire School Board, the state school board, and they decided to side with Prospect Mountain. They interpreted the RSA 194D, sections 1 through 3, mostly section 3, as no, Prospect Mountain is an open enrollment school. Kids were had applied, and there was some sort of acceptance criteria, and they were allowed in, and so Pittsfield had to pay. That was challenged to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and the New Hampshire Supreme Court sided with the New Hampshire School Board's decision, and so Pittsfield had to pay, or has to pay. So I bring this to you because it's important that our schools' reputation is strong, that we're appropriately funded, that the offerings that we have for our kids are what they need, and that that they're given a variety of opportunities. And I will throw out a question: what would happen if other school districts in this area decided to become open enrollment schools? What would take place? Where would we be? I have a meeting next Friday with 2 of our local school districts just to even talk about this conversation. I do think that it's a conversation that's speeding up within the region. I'm sure there's going to be conversations with the region how to help support one another. Our school district has already, our school board 2 to 3 years ago in the policy committee had actually talked about this and had set a tuition rate and criteria for how to accept people and so forth. So some of that work has already been done, but it hasn't gone through the process that the RSA tells us we would need to do if we wanted to become an open enrollment school. So these are the realities that are out there. It's this decision is extraordinarily important for us all to understand the ramifications of that, and to be paying very close attention to what we do both in our own district and what is going around in the districts around us. And tonight we'll talk about budget development. Some overarching things to consider. We're still waiting for the RING tax information, so we don't have that yet. We just received the Jaffrey tax information shown to the right. I will enlarge that, hopefully, for you here. Maybe not. Well, what I will do is read this then, is that just this is just information, it's public information, in that last year, as we looked at the municipal tax rate in Jaffrey, was $10.57, and in the local education it was $16.22, and state education was $2. Because of valuation changes, which not quite doubled, but it's getting there, the municipal rate will be $6.24, the local education will be $9.35, and the state education $1.12. Now, we don't know what that is all going to play out as. We don't know what RING has for tax information, so it's difficult to be able to forecast what would happen to a tax rate. I mean, in theory, taxes would go down as a result of that, but we know that's not really how it works. So, just to keep that in mind. We also, as a board, last time talked about wanting to really have a good grasp of the default budget. That is still being worked on. There's still information that we do not have access to, but the information we do have, we can have good estimates for where we would be at. So we have this year's adopted budget. This year's adopted budget does not include anything that the board added in through the use of the funds that we had the hearing for. Athletics, activities, I think world language at the high school, library at the elementary school, and there were a couple other items as well. I know there was a district position, SAU position that is gone. We currently are operating without a facilities director. So All those things are not in the default. Pushing those items aside, all of that was approximately 1.1, if we were to forecast it into next year, probably 1.2, 1.25 million. That's not included in the default budget. The default budget would include anything that's of a legal nature that we're bound to, or that the voters have already approved, like contracts. So the third year of the JREA, that's the Teachers Association, CBA, those step increases, the JREA and JRSSA estimated health insurance increases, those are all contractual. And then, of course, the item that we communicated about, that we've been talking about and will continue to talk about, health insurance assessment that came to 90 or so locations within the state of New Hampshire, because we're part of an insurance pool, a risk pool with School Care, as they work for us, with Cigna being the actual company. We've had very good relationships over the years. We've been able to really maintain probably some of the better rates in the areas, at least from an increase standpoint, over the last decade. That said, the last couple of years, for those who hadn't been part of this conversation, School Care had higher than anticipated costs, claims, and so they had used all of their contingency funds and had to charge those members of the pool to be able to build that up again. And so our portion was $585,000. Roughly $139,000 of that has already been paid off through funds from last year, because it was technically a last year's expense. We still have over $400,000 that we would need to pay. We do not have that budgeted. We do not anticipate having that as extra at the end of the year. Things can happen, but we can't make those decisions right now. And so in order to pay this by the mandated time, which is July 15, we would put this into the default budget. It is required. All of that is approximately 1.5 million higher than the current adopted budget. It's a little bit higher than even the approved budget, that with everything that we've put into it. So that's just the cost of doing business as usual. So that's important information for you to know as we have those other conversations about four-year-old pre-K, which last year was a $400,000, $425,000 item. Athletics activities, approximately that $600,000 item. Transportation increases that. I do know that Heather's been working on schedules and other things of that nature to be able to reduce some of those costs, which I think will be effective. Nonetheless, still it's going to be over that $500,000 number. And then some of those other educational school day positions. Plus other conversations that we're going to have starting tonight. So thank you all for coming. This is just to catch people up to speed, give us kind of a baseline of information, talk a little bit back here with the realities of what's happening within our state. I suspect there's a lot more going on within our state as it pertains to school funding, public education in general, and how funding should occur, and also how it does occur. What's going to be budgeted, what's not going to be budgeted, all at the state level, what's going to be supported in the legislature, what's not, what your legislators support, and what they don't support. That's my report.
Okay. As we get ready for the next piece, could you please show this page on
Yes.
the screen? So I'd like to just remind everybody, as we go through the different schools, the different lines. You know, we're not going to have the deepest detail tonight. This is preliminary. This is the beginning of the conversation. But I do need to draw your attention to a specific place on our website where we spent the last 6 months delving into some really heavy financial pieces, so in depth that it would be very hard to answer if somebody's saying, tell us how food service works. That's kind of very, very difficult to answer in a 2-minute time period. But we do have in the, probably in the June minutes before that, an hour about food service. We have an hour or so about activities. If you look at the far right presentation side, this is all in our agenda and minutes. Those are the sections of those meetings that we had that give you that real detail about our testing and how that happens and our financial audit controls. So those items are in there. I just want to make sure everybody sees that. And as you have questions, as we're going through the budget process this season, please refer back to these for the real depth that we go into. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
So, are we allowed to ask questions then?
About the superintendent's report?
Yeah.
We are.
Yes, okay. So, Ruby, did I understand you to say that the default budget at this point is likely to be slightly above the adopted budget based on, or including the monies added back in from contingency funds?
No. As of right now, the default budget, and I think this is a conservative estimate, is going to be 1.5 million higher than what the voters approved for our operating budget plus anything else that was added in there by warrant article
Right.
last. So when the board, another way of looking at it is when the board used the
Unexpended
fund, the
contingency.
unexpended fund balance, yep. When that was used, that put another 1.1 million on top of that. So the default budget will be more than our adopted budget plus that 1.1 million.
Okay,
So that's a starting, that will be a starting point right there.
okay.
Yeah.
And then just the other question, and maybe this is obvious, but in terms of open enrollment,
Yeah.
how does the defeat of the career and technical education project play into
Mm.
that open enrollment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is my opinion, okay? So what I'm about to say, I think it was a very short-sighted, and it was a big mistake. I do think that we had an opportunity that will likely not come around again. I think that that might even be broached within the presentation coming up, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But it had an immediate impact on us, and again, I think more so than this, and this is my opinion, more so than the pushing away of that future type of thinking and that that type of learning and the resources necessary to do that type of learning here. I think the message, and it was a strong defeat. It wasn't like 100 votes or anything. It was a strong defeat. That's a very loud message. And so what's that message telling those around us in other areas when it comes to open enrollment? It's interesting because we do get a lot of information, a lot of feedback from towns around us. We have one school reaching out to us right now and reaching out to our middle high school for help because of the Ed 306s that came through the minimum standards. Because our district has for the last 7 years moved forward in the competency-based, proficiency-based, and beyond process, much of which we got a lot of criticism for early on, but we persevered. We're now sitting in the best place, the best position in the entire region for that, maybe even close to the best in the state. But we have people reaching out to us for help, assistance, how can we move forward, that sort of thing. But you know, other individuals, I remember the first people who congratulated us, the first, you know, by mail anyway, that congratulated us when the CMHS had the High School of Excellence was a gentleman from Wallier Family Chevrolet in Keene. You know, other people are looking at us and have been following us for quite some time, actually. We've had very good press in the paper over the years, and not just the Ledger, but also the Sentinel, and we've been in the state papers, and sometimes we've hit some national pieces as well on small items. But so everything we do is very visible and is very much communicated. So that type of communication doesn't send a message to others in other areas that they're valuing what we believe is important for our kids. So, my opinion.
Okay. Any more questions?
Could you bring the slides back up, Ruben?
Yeah.
So,
Usually I
Like,
can increase, I apologize.
hopefully, I'll go quickly because I do want to hear the presentations. But the way I look at this, right, is that it's just to provide the same services that we provide today. It's 1.5 million more, plus another 1.1 to 2.6, and plus I think that the other piece that's missing here is what we saw last year is that even when we cut the budget, everyone's taxes still went up, right? Because we get less revenue from the state. So I don't know what that number is going to be. I think, you know, a few $100,000 is likely. So round that off to 3 million, right? So we're looking at a situation where just to provide, you know, initially there may be some areas that we can certainly find efficiencies, but if we were to just say, all right, we want to do everything that we're doing today, you know, with all those, with the things that we brought back, like athletics still in there, it's going to be about $3 million more. We're looking at it as a baseline. I guess that's why I look in my head. So if you're talking about cutting $3 million to keep it flat, we also already just went through that activity early this year, so we know what that looks like. So I don't know, I'm just trying to set expectations there. In my mind, I look at this and say, you know, just to continue what we're doing now, it's a $3 million impact likely. Not that we won't be able to find certainly other efficiencies, but I think that's the environment we're in. And I will say that the tax rate or the valuation is going to be super important. Everyone knows that the majority of their town taxes are the schools. Half of that formula is the valuation of two towns. So it's really important that both Jaffrey and Ringe get reevaluated at the same time, or else that whole formula gets out of whack, right? You can't have Jaffrey double and Ringe stay the same, then all that cost goes to Jaffrey. Super important that those valuations go at the same time, and any sort of shift in that will also have a huge impact on people's taxes. You know, if Ringe goes up a lot more than Jaffrey, that's what it is, right? That's the formula that's been in place since 1970. I know a lot of people don't like it. You know, that's what it is. So that the valuation, I think, is something that people should be paying attention to as well as we go forward, because that'll shift costs between towns.
I guess what I would like to add, that piece, Chris, is as we're moving forward in this process, I do want to be very careful to avoid speculation on what we are going to be budgeting for next. Like we have to start with a baseline and simply build up as practically as possible. So I hear those numbers, but they make me nervous at this stage. Right now, we're looking at 1.5 million. So we need to stick with baselines and then build up. But I hear, it's in everybody's heads, I get it. But I do want to be careful what we communicate. I don't want those numbers kind of just in an ether. We're sticking with a baseline. and just.
Yeah, it's just, it's important to know two things. One, it's important to just remember that the adopted budget was based upon the $3 million change. So lower than what the board had as the majority of the board had approved to go forward. The other thing that's semi-related, it's just really more of a communication piece, is we did not publicize this on purpose because we have never done it in this way. We are actually doing our usual stream, but also on Facebook Live right now simultaneously. We're going to collect data from that, see if that's a good way of communicating. As you know, people who are scrolling on their phone at home, it will pop right up and maybe listen, and so we'll be able to get that information. The Facebook Live, they wouldn't be able to ask questions from that, but still it would be a way to receive information.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, on to the budget presentation, please. And it looks like we have
Thank you.
our SAU 47 shared budget priorities. Who will be speaking to that first?
Oh, sorry. So first of all, thank you for having us here today to share with you our budgets. I think it's important to note that as we look forward at SAU 47, we've worked tremendously hard over the last several years to align pre-K through 12. And so we wanted to start by sharing that we've worked collaboratively to look at budget priorities that are PK through 12, knowing that we are a collaborative school district that really wants to work together to create the strongest, most cohesive experience for our learners and families. As an entire SAU, all three of our schools, is that we have some shared budget priorities that you'll see rise to the surface in all of our budgets. One of them is continuing our professional learning communities that promote learner and staff growth. Specifically, all of our schools utilize MTSS, school and district level teams, and PLC, school-based teams. This work really spends time looking at data and evidence about how we can move our learners forward and strengthen ourselves as educators. We also have shared priority of embedded and targeted professional development. This includes OGAP, which is our math training, which allows our educators to not only enhance their own mathematical reasoning, but also their ability to utilize instructional strategies to help our learners grow in that area. Embedded and targeted professional development in Wit and Wisdom, which is a K-8 new tool that we utilize. We started utilizing that last year. It's been really powerful to have a K-8 tool. Our teachers are talking across transitions, across schools. It's been really powerful. Continuing to utilize responsive classroom at the elementary level. We're a fully responsive classroom trained school system, and we really are proud of that fact and utilize it. It's the foundation of what we do. Continued professional development in the utilization of AIMSweb Plus, which is our universal screening tool and assessment. It occurs 3 times a year. We just started using AIMSweb Plus a few years ago, and so we still need to continue to provide professional development around the utilization and analysis of the results. And then the restorative practices work that we're doing as a system. In addition to that, you're going to hear us talk about staffing a little bit, especially the new Ed 306 requirements and what that's going to look like. I know David's going to speak to that a lot. It has an impact greatly at the middle high school level and a slight impact at the elementary level, but very strong impact at the middle high school level. We want to continue to hire the strongest possible candidates to fill our open positions to make sure that our learners are receiving the highest level of education possible. And we'd like to discuss adding back the permanent substitute position at each school that used to be there when a staff member is absent. To be able to have a consistent person that knows our school, knows the culture, and knows the community means that our learners won't have the disruption in educational service as can currently happen if we have kind of a rotation of substitutes in classes. So those are some shared budget priorities across all 3 schools. Either one of you want to add anything?
I would just add that with the substitute conversation, the lack of substitutes is a significant issue that's affecting schools and teachers. Obviously, we can't leave classrooms unfilled, but it's not unusual to have 10 people perhaps out at any given time across a building this size. That's 5 to 10 people is pretty normal, especially at the height of sick season and things like that. And I might be fortunate to get 2 substitutes in the building most days to fill in for that. So this is a lot of teachers crisscrossing the building, trying to cover for each other during their periods for preparation or things like that. It drains teachers, it saps their time to plan for their own lessons, and over the long haul, it's not a sustainable model. But I have 2 substitutes in this building who can consistently come in. So, and I know that's a similar challenge at both elementary schools. And we've tried many different approaches to hiring per diem subs. I know that the school board raised the rates a few years ago to try to be more competitive, but there's just a lack of candidates for those positions, and we're competing with every local school district for the same exact pool of resource there. So it's a significant barrier to long-term sustainability, and it's sapping our staff pretty quickly to be covering without substitutes.
So we're going to move now into school-based priorities. We're going to start with our elementary work. This is our projected enrollment for next year. We are not projecting increasing any number of classes. You'll see that there is a shift in from 3 to 2 in 5th grade and a shift from 2 to 3 in kindergarten. A few years ago, the preschool, the 3-year-old preschool, was transitioned 100% to RMS. So you'll see in their projected enrollment a much higher preschool and 2 additional classes in that, as all of the 3-year-old pre-K is now housed at RMS, and that used to be at JGS as well. And so you will see that that is our current class enrollment projected for next year. If we continue to our enrollment trends at JGS, you'll see our total school enrollment over the last several years, over the last 7 years, the number of homerooms and our average class sizes. It's important to note that of those 18 homerooms that are currently there, 16 of them are pre-K through 5th grade single grade level classrooms, and we do have 2 incredible classroom spaces as well that are restorative classrooms as well. And so 16 and 2 make up that total of 18 class sizes, and that was just implemented in the 24-25 school year. So that is our enrollment trend and our teacher-student ratios at JGS. Now we're going to get into our budget highlights. Our current year approved budget, which is our current fiscal year 25-26, was approximately $34,000 less than our FY 24-25. So when you're looking at about $130,000 overall budget, that's a substantial impact. This upcoming year, so what we are proposing for fiscal year 26-27, are relatively budget neutral when compared to fiscal year 24-25, with some exceptions. And so proposed budget reflects approximately $33,000 increase to our current fiscal year 25-26 approved budget, but still approximately $1,000 less than our budget was proposed 2 years ago, or actual was 2 years ago. So if we continue on, there's some more details. Here are some significant increases or decreases in the JGS budget highlights. You'll notice that there is a substantial increase in our online subscriptions. It's a $5,000 increase from fiscal year 25-26 and a $3,000 increase from fiscal year 24-25. That is due to our cost center now including PLTW, which is a tool that we utilize in our STEM class, as well as across other areas. We now will include Zern, which is our math tool, and Mystery Science. Those were paid for via grants in the past and will now be included in our own cost center budget. Field trips were decreased to 0 for this current fiscal year, and so it will look like a $10,000 increase from our current fiscal year 25-26, but it is level funded to 24-25 with a 0 increase from that year. It reflects a return to our past practice, level funded. Supplies, you'll see that it looks like there's a $10,000 increase from fiscal year 25-26, but it's only reflective of approximately a $2,000 increase from fiscal year 24-25, and that's based on an increase in overall materials cost. That also includes things like copy paper and materials such as that laminator paper, things like that that we utilize as a whole school. Professional services, you'll see an $8,000 increase from FY 25-26. It's approximately, however, a $1,500 decrease from the fiscal year 24-25. So the increase from this current fiscal year to the proposal for next year increases in required consult for 504s, as well as trying to return to where we were in 24-25 with our ability to provide opportunities for our learners. You'll see that the books line is approximately $7,000 decrease from the current fiscal year and a $4,000 decrease from the fiscal year 24-25. The reason for that is that the consumable cost decreased for that last year and this year, and that's because some of these materials were able to be purchased utilizing grant funds for those 2 years. That may not be accurate for future years, which means that you may see an increase in that book line in the future when we need to order those consumables again. And that's like workbooks and things like that that we need to purchase every year. In regards to our summer programming, I put this on here because I think it's important to note that 2 years ago, the fiscal year 24-25, approximately $25,000 was moved from the JGS cost center line to the RMS cost center line. So you'll see that reflected as an increase in RMS's budget in 24-25, but it wasn't really an increase. It was a movement of that because our summer programming was housed 100% at the RMS campus, even though it provided services to both JGS and RMS students. And so it used to be funded separately, and it was funded together. And so there's zero decrease from FY 25-26. And so I just wanted to note that, is that we are not proposing summer programming in the upcoming proposal, but there you will notice that that line remains as is. So if we continue on, I'm going to transition over to Nikki.
Yep. So the RMS slides look very similar. The numbers are a little bit different, but the format is exactly the same. So the table on the left-hand side shows our enrollment at RMS at the beginning of October, and then what we project for next year. There's a couple of things to note here. We have 2 unusual class sizes this year. We have a very small 5th grade class, which is particularly unusual. There's just 32 students split between 2 homerooms this year. And then we have this really small kindergarten group, again, that is just split between 2 homerooms this year. So those two numbers are sort of out of character for RMS when you look at the rest of our class sizes. We're not projecting that kindergarten will be as low next year. One of the factors of that is that we have a considerable high number of students who we call them PS4. They're 4-year-old preschoolers who are currently enrolled at RMS. We have around 35 that are currently, will be projected to move into kindergarten next year. And then we can see that we add, a handful of students, knowing that students that are not in preschool still join us in kindergarten. But that's why there's the asterisks. All of the other numbers just continue to move all the way through. So next year we'll be seeing slightly more students than we have this year, because our 5th grade small group will move out and we'll have bigger class sizes following everywhere else. As Deanna mentioned, you can see in that preschool line that we have 4 classrooms. So we host the district special ed preschool program. So that's 2 classes. You can see in October of this year, there is currently only around 18 students in each of those classes, but some of the spaces are earmarked and saved for students who turn 3 throughout the school year. So we likely see increases in those classes throughout the year. The end of the year, we're usually closer to 28 students in each of those classes, 14 in the morning, 14 in the afternoon. So it gives us higher preschool numbers there. We're projecting, sorry Ruben, can you go back? Yep. We're projecting to have the same amount of classrooms next year as we have this year. 2 of those being the half-day programs that are actually funded through student services lines. So of our 20 classrooms at RMS, 18 are funded through general education. Thank you. In just before 1920, our school enrollment was high. It took a pretty significant shift during the year of COVID, and that we've slowly sort of rebounded. Our enrollment is pretty stable, and we have fewer classrooms this year, that will continue to have fewer classrooms next year, but our average class size has stayed pretty stable, just based on the number of classrooms that we have at RMS. So while we've seen some fluctuation with enrollment, it is pretty stable. And we have made those reductions of number of homerooms last year and the year before. Deanna noted this. So as I shared, I think Deanna maybe did a nicer job of, in the next slide, comparing the reduction or increase compared to this current year. I based all of mine off of comparing to FY25. And the reason why is there are a lot of things that we are not providing students this year as a result of the significant reduction to our school district budget, that my proposal puts those things back in. Puts it back in. And so I just compared to what it was when it was in. You'll see that our current year approved budget, so what we're able to spend this year, is approximately $57,000 than it was in the year prior, which is about 1/3 of the total non-personnel RMS lines. So we are right around about $150,000 for all of our spending when you take personnel out. So it's $57,000 less than that this year. When we look at what we propose for this year, for the FY27, our proposed budget reflects a $46,000 increase over what we actually have to spend this year. But when you compare that with what we had to spend in 2024, 2025, we're actually recommending a budget reduction. Generally, all of our RMS lines are budget neutral, with some exceptions that we'll go through on the next slide. There is a slight increase in our general education supply line of $4,000. These supplies are things like chart paper and Post-it notes and dry erase markers. As we have evolved, our instructional practices have evolved with us, and students are doing a lot more work with paper and pencil and not accessing their Chromebooks as much, and so therefore there's a cost there that supports our Wit and Wisdom literacy work and also responsive classroom. There's an increase in our Tier 2 instruction book line. We are requesting that we purchase Geodes, which is part of a reading program that our K-3 teachers currently have. Our reading specialist does not. That is fully aligned with Wit and Wisdom and also our phonics instruction through Foundations. So our reading specialist does not currently have those materials, and we would like to purchase them for that role to use with students for intervention. Our online subscription has increased by $3,000, and this just reflects the quotes that we've received for the FY27 school year. It does not include any new online subscriptions. It is just maintenance of the ones that are being used daily throughout the school. There's an increase in our health office line of an additional $1,700 to purchase a second AED. The RMS campus, the building itself is quite large, and the ability to be able to move quickly in the area of need, like if there was an emergency out in the preschool and we needed an AED for any reason, the AED is actually in the main lobby, and so to get that device to that part of the building would take time, and if somebody was in need of an AED, it's time they don't have, so we would like to recommend a second device to be purchased for the other end of the building. We began with STEM instruction at RMS last year. We're in our second year of STEM. However, in all the time that has been part of our budget or part of our program offering, it has had a $0 budget. And so there is a $5,000 increase from $0 to $5,000 in our STEM line, so that we can adequately fund that program and ensure that it is engaging and successful for students. The music department has requested that we purchase chairs that are incredibly expensive and also really, really important. And we have quite a large number of students who participate in band and chorus, and these are chairs that are matched for small children's bodies and now allow them to be able to sing and play in ways that is conducive to their body. You'll see a reduction in the science line. This is due to some of the science concepts and curriculum being embedded into STEM. You'll see a reduction in our request for library in the area of books. This is more in line with the reduction that was actually made this year. And our librarian believes that they can continue to manage a really dynamic collection with a reduced cost. And as Deanna said, we are not proposing to host and run summer programming, what we call in the past PEP, not to be confused with extended school year services, which are legally required for students who qualify through special education. So this is PEP programming. When we looked at our academic data through AimsWeb, we found that this year there was not enough data to support the costs that we were incurring. This is really just the staffing cost. There was also transportation. So the PEP program was costing the school district, I would say, roughly around $60,000 between both schools, and we felt that we did not get $60,000 worth of benefit, and have opted to propose that we eliminate that from our current budget this year. We have some common priorities, Deanna spoke about these really on the beginning slide, that are true across the district, but really sort of like looking at numbers of what does this look like at the elementary level, with the exception of the second largest bullet on the left-hand side, which is the addition of a JGS reading specialist. Everything else that is on here, the top 2 bullets, are things that we currently fund. We are asking that that funding continues to support our PLC team leaders, our MTSS teams, and that ongoing commitment to professional development. Something that is a little bit different is the bottom right-hand bullet is around targeted professional development. We have invested considerably in the last 4 to 5 years in professional development for our staff, and as we hire new people, we want to ensure that they have the same level of understanding of our philosophies and approaches, whether it's things like responsive classroom or our instructional tools, whether it's things like Wit and Wisdom. So we want to make sure that there are funds available to provide targeted professional development for newly hired teachers, as well as for teachers who shift in content areas. So you can see, if we went back to the slide with class configurations for next year, we're predicting that we'll have a 5th grade teacher that we don't have this year, so we'll be moving people around, and sometimes that means that teachers they may be veteran teachers with us, but they've never used a particular tool because it's not been in the grade level that they teach, but now they are. And I'll give an example. We don't use Foundations as our phonics program with 4th and 5th grade teachers, but we do K to 3. So if we had a 4th or 5th grade teacher move down to the lower grades, we would want to make sure that we could provide them with professional development for that core instruction that they're required to be providing daily. I'm going to turn it over to Deanna with regards to the JGS reading specialist.
This is an Ed 306 necessity for minimum standards of public schools in New Hampshire, is that every public school is supposed to have a reading specialist. And so we need to ensure that that occurs at JGS. And so we are proposing adding that role to JGS General Fund. It has been funded in different ways with different staff in the past, and we now need to put it into the general fund. It's an Ed 306 requirement.
Okay, so jumping into the middle high school, before I get any further into the presentation, I want to just lay out a couple of assumptions that I had in putting together the initial budget run. And if these assumptions do not bear out, obviously the priorities might shift. One assumption that I have is that the items that were funded with the unencumbered fund balance retention this year, so athletics, activities, and the French teacher, would remain or end up in the final budget for the year. So I will reference things that increase to make sure that's the case, but if that was not something that would move forward, that might shift the priorities that I would put on the table for the budget. So I just want to make clear that those are assumptions I have made in putting this proposal forward. First, I have stated this several times, that any opportunity I get to speak to the public, I will highlight the things that don't always get highlighted about our school. High schools tend to get a lot of attention, and not always for the right reasons. I think we get a lot of attention, and it should be and is for the right reasons. The first in the top left is the U.S. News and World Report's rankings of public high schools in New Hampshire. CHS, the high school half of our building, climbed to number 27 in the state, the number 1 in the greater Keene area. The closest to us in this region is Conval, which is number 25, so they are only a couple of spaces ahead of us. And as was shared last year at the budget presentations, we were funded as number 68 out of 72, lowest funding for high schools, and are still achieving at fantastic levels by this third-party organization that rates schools on a variety of factors. Great Schools updated its ratings this year, and Conant jumped from 5 out of 10 on the ratings to 9 out of 10 on the ratings, based, as stated here, with putting us into the above average category, significantly above most other schools in this region. And last year we were selected by the state of New Hampshire as the Secondary School of Excellence. And there's a long description here that folks can read, but they essentially, through their vetting of our school's curriculum, visit with our staff and learners, seeing what the school environment looks like, vetting the achievements and the growth and graduation rates, which has been really compelling. I gave a presentation at the last meeting about this. They felt that our school stands out and recognized us for, quote, the deep commitment to personalized learning, academic rigor, student voice, and meaningful community partnership. At Conant, learning is flexible, challenging, and centered around student growth, and they go on. So again, there's negative comments that get made that are simply not true, and I'm going to take every opportunity to highlight some positive things that hopefully will better inform the budget for this year. So we've talked a lot tonight about Ed 306. Ed 306 refers to the education regulation, number 306, which was just revised. It's the minimum standards for public schools that utilizes a lot of shalls. And a shall in a regulation means it's required by law, not a recommendation. So feel free to jump in and read the multiple hundreds of pages of Ed 306 regulation if you'd like. But some of the key areas that affect our schools, and in particular the secondary school, for one, for a while New Hampshire has required competencies, but they haven't really enforced it. The new Ed 306 enforces this. Schools are required to only award credit and only to move students from one grade to the next through demonstration of competencies, which we refer to as learning goals. Competencies must be aligned with approved standards. So in our learning goal documents, which are our competencies, we have them. That's a check mark. A lot of schools still don't. And we have standards aligned to these competencies that our staff have been spending some time revisiting and making sure are really clear. We've already set in our school that course credit is only awarded based on attainment of competencies rather than amount of time sat in a seat. That was a requirement 2 revisions ago in Ed 306 that is now being enforced, and we already have that checked thanks to the work that our staff has put in, tireless work over the last several years. Schools are required to have a process for accepting alternative competency evidence. We have a very arduous process that doesn't quite align with Ed 306. The new version, so I will be coming to the board with some possible language for that in the future, but that box is mostly checked and we've been doing that already. There's a new requirement that promotion from one grade to another across grade spans is based only on achievement of competencies. That's a big shift for us at the middle school level because that has not historically been the practice of middle schools. What that means is if we have learners who are not passing a learning goal, they either have to do that over the summer or get retained at grade level and repeat that grade. Again, that's a big implication that we haven't really thought about as a community, especially with removing summer programming as we did this past year. Schools are required to have career programming at all grade levels with an emphasis at the high school level. We already have that. 5 years ago, we started a Foundations for the Future program, which was centered around visiting one's own interests, looking at career pathways, digging into Zello, looking at post-secondary learning, and having a plan, a personal learning plan that followed them through 4 years of high school. And last year, we started our first year of the career capstone with our seniors. So that box is already checked, and this year it came into effect with the Ed 306. So a lot of this work we already have done. Some of it we couldn't possibly have had done, like the new graduation requirements, which are very interesting. We'll talk about that in a moment. Some new learning opportunities that are required at the middle school level that were not previously, and then some additional avenues that we have to build in for student choice based on the Learn Everywhere platform with less control at the school level for what that looks like. So this is pulled right out of a toolkit for implementation. This was the kind of executive summary about competency-based education, which I've been in the district a long time now and lived through the early stages of doing this work and felt some of the pain of the community kind of expressing its thoughts on this. However, this is now the requirement in New Hampshire to have competency-based education with local competencies that, again, we call those learning goals, centered around academic standards with intentional language, clear indicator of when competency is being met. That is not grades, by the way. They are now recommending that schools print learning goals on report cards, which we have been doing for 4 years. So again, we're already doing the things that are now becoming required for other schools. And I put this out at this stage of the conversation because it's another example of work that our schools have been doing that unfortunately have not been recognized in a positive way in the community that is now required by the state. The next slide looks at the graduation requirements. So the left-hand column is the previous graduation requirements at the minimum level. Schools are authorized and encouraged to have their own additional requirements. So in our school, it's 23 credits total, for example, but this is the state minimum. You can see that there's some interesting shifts that require some understanding of the language. For example, English is shifting from 4 credits required under the previous rules to 3.5 credits to include a half credit of writing. So kind of looking at that overlap is interesting. Mathematics is going backwards in time. We shifted from algebraic concepts to requiring algebra, and now we're going back to algebraic concepts. But they've also now added a half credit in statistics or data analysis. So we've always had a probability and statistics course as an option. We now have to require that learners pass that, which is a big lift for some learning pathways. Social studies has taken quite a shift, and we're still trying to understand what the state is asking for. For example, previously it was 1 credit for U.S. and New Hampshire history. Now it's a half credit for U.S. history and a half credit for New Hampshire history. We used to have a half credit for U.S. and New Hampshire government and civics. That's now a half credit for civics. But then there's another credit that's required for history, government, and constitution of the U.S. and New Hampshire. So what's the distinction between civics and history versus history and government? We had to work that out as a staff, and our social studies team is working on that. You can see economics, which used to include personal finance as a half credit, is now a half credit of economics and a half credit of financial literacy. So there's a lot of additions here and refinements that are going to require some shift in personnel. Social studies has gone from 3 required credits to 4.5 in the sweep of 1 rule. And we were not staffed necessarily to handle that many different learning opportunities. The good news is that because we have a competency-based model already in place and really flexible and wonderful staff, I think we're going to be able to find out lots of ways to incorporate this. But these are the big ideas we're looking at. Where do we actually need new courses versus where can we revise current ones? And a lot of this can be done with revision work that's careful. How can we meet these new required courses in math and social studies with current staffing? That's our goal. And I think, again, that we'll be able to do that with some revision. And then when we have some of those similar sounding credits, like U.S. and New Hampshire history, and then history, government, and constitution of U.S. and New Hampshire, how do we make sure those are distinct and that any overlaps are intentionally done? So there's a lot of work and a lot of questions that we're still working through as a staff. One thing that took me off guard, because I didn't realize that this was part of the conversation, in our quest for being fiscally frugal as a district, we have eliminated systematically our business teachers. Over 15 years that I've been in the district, we went from 2 to 0. The new Ed 306 requirements require, there's that language shall, the local school board shall ensure a developmentally appropriate business education program at each high school consistent with local competencies and curriculum pursuant to, and that Ed 306 reference is the business education curriculum statements, and that it gets developed a lot further from there. Previously, we were under the impression, because that word program did not exist, anything that's this reddish highlight is as a change of language, that we were able to utilize our connection with other schools like Conval's business program to satisfy this. However, we are now required to house a business program at our high school. So that's a change for us that's going to require some adjustment in staffing. The other piece that was a big shift was the STEM, computer science, digital literacy components. Computer science has been required at the high school level previously, not necessarily so much as a program, but at least a basket of competencies. You can see here it's now required as a program, as well as technology and engineering, and the small box is digital literacy. And this requirement for computer science extends to each school, so that includes the middle school where it didn't previously exist as a requirement, in addition to maintaining and keeping technology and engineering, which we already have through STEM, and digital literacy, which we incorporate through STEM. So we're essentially adding a third requirement now at the middle school level, and this comes the year that due to the budget cuts, we eliminated our third STEM position, so we don't have the staffing now to cover 3 different areas. So again, these Ed 306 changes, I'm highlighting them because these are required by law and things that we have to incorporate in a specific manner. The word program here is defined in the regulations. It's a very specifically chosen word. We can't one-off a learning goal and say we have a program, because a program requires a collection of learning opportunities that lead to proficiency in the state standards. It's a intentionally chosen word by the state. And this is just another example for the middle school. This shows the areas that a middle school is required. You can see the language, the local school board shall distribute instructional time to allow each student to make progression toward proficiency and competencies in the following areas for middle school, arts education, including music and visual arts. We did eliminate one of our music teachers in the budget cuts cycle, so that has been a little bit tough, but we're not proposing any changes there because we have sufficient movement between music and visual arts. English language arts and reading, health and wellness education, physical education, digital literacy, computer science, that's the one that we did not previously have at the middle level, mathematics, science, social studies including civics and Holocaust and genocide education, starting no later than grade 8, and then engineering and technology, and there's a pretty sizable list under engineering and technology. So again, I'm just emphasizing these are things that are required by law based on the revision to the Ed 306 minimum standards. We've already been working as a staff on implementation of anything that affects the middle high school. The left-hand column shows the work that we're doing this year. We've spent some time already in our 6 through 12 teams. We've given up some staff meeting times for those teams to look at the approved standards that are tied into our learning goals and make sure those are clearly listed on the learning goals. The tying in of standards to learning goals happened when we wrote them, but we've drifted as we've revised learning goals. So the staff is making sure those are really clear. We've also focused on a new template for the learning goals because those need to be publicly available. One of the Ed 306 requirements is a pathway for individuals to bring portfolios of evidence or other evidence of completion and ask for credit. So we need to have a really clear template for those learning goals to support that evaluation process when individuals do that. We need to look at the bundling of the learning goals into courses at the middle level and credits at the high school to make sure they're clear and that they align with the new Ed 306 requirements that go into effect with next year's freshman class. We are going to have to create learning goals entirely, starting from standards and working up for a business program that we have not had for at least the last 6 or 7 years, and a middle school computer science program which has never existed. We have to revise the process for alternative credit pathways because there's a lot more paths we have to add in based on the Ed 306. And then with the class of 2030, which is next year's freshmen, we have to identify how we're going to meet those credits, which are very different from the current ones, and do so in a way that allows us to transition out the existing 3 grade levels next year. In other words, we can't scrap all of our traditional U.S. history classes because those are still required for next year's sophomores, juniors, and seniors and onward. So that's this year's work, is kind of getting the required next year pieces done and sketching out the work for the next few years. And next year we'll focus on the new social studies and math and ELA courses that go beyond the 9th grade year. Implementing middle school social studies is having quite a shift. It's required to emphasize more heavily civics and genocide studies. So we have to look at the historical pieces and revise how those align. So we're focusing on next year implementing 6th grade and then kind of start continuing that with 6th and 7th the following year and 6th, 7th, and 8th the year after that. And then finalizing any other curricular shifts with Ed 306. So this is the thing that has not been talked about a lot in New Hampshire, but has a huge impact, and a lot of communities and schools are now grappling with what this is going to look like. I attended an implementation session back in September that had 200 people at least. They had to go to a different venue because people all of a sudden realized how much was going on and were kind of thirsting for opportunities to learn what it would mean for their schools. So in the world of making tough decisions, this is one that I'm putting out for the board to consider and the community to consider, and it's not one that I personally like at all. However, I'm looking at required additions of computer science at the middle school, required addition of business education at the high school, stabilizing the cuts that were made this past year and adding new programming to support Ed 306. And honestly, the decisions and the conversation last year kind of poisoned the well for me for being able to find somebody to teach this program. When I posted, so the teacher we previously had was somebody we had invested multiple years in to grow him into the role, and he had done a wonderful job. Many of his graduates went on into either related trades. We had some linemen for the first time ever who got accepted into prestigious apprenticeships, and they found a path through the construction trades and found that the trades were for them and went that route. We have others who have joined local businesses, others who have gone on to post-secondary learning. He was doing a great job. And unfortunately, when the discussion around CTE, particularly at the deliberative session, occurred last year, there was vocal negative comments from people who have never stepped foot in his program or interacted with his kids, making comments like he was the jack of all trades and the expert of none, and he heard those things. And then the community overwhelmingly voted against giving a space that was appropriate for the trades while saying we value the trades. these things had a big impact, and it's not the reason that teacher moved on. However, it certainly weighed into his decision. And when I posted that position this summer, to give some context, when I post a position, even a difficult one, I would typically get between 70 to 100 views on the application. I could see how many views. I had 14. Milford was hiring for a construction teacher. Keene was hiring for a construction teacher. They both filled theirs. I had 0 applicants. The conversations the community has around this topic matter. And saying we value the trades, but having discourse that doesn't do that, makes it so it's hard for me to find somebody who's going to come in and do this role. I will also point out that the current space, which is part of what started the conversation around the revision, is woefully inadequate for an actual construction program. It functions more like a middle school wood shop. A teacher who's weighing going to Milford or Keene, which have actual facilities for construction, or here, it's an easy decision. I also regretfully need to point out that there were vocal comments made that people would teach our kids themselves, offer internships, come in and help the class. I have received 0 offers of help from any of our local Jaffrey or Orange organizations centered around the trades. I had a working group of 6 people from all different towns in the Southwest region, none of them from R2, who came and met with us and found placement for our kids, 15 seats in Keene, a program called Advanced Technical Schooling that's allowed some of our kids who needed just the electrical pieces to go into an electrical journeyman's program. Nothing from Jaffrey or Wrench. And on Career Day, which we have every April, and 70-ish or more businesses come in, we reach out every year, and we get the same handful of people. Mountain Shade's always here. Heavy Haulers is always here. Not a whole lot of others. These things matter. So the bottom line is, I don't know that I will ever find another teacher, at least in the foreseeable future, who would take our role over one of the others. This is a high-demand teaching role. I have to weigh how am I going to ask the community to fund some of these Ed 306 requirements. For me, I've got places to send our kids who want this trade. It's going to cost us more to do that in the long run, unfortunately, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. However, I don't see the value of keeping an expensive program like this, advocating that instead of something else. And the something else could be, unfortunately, something like athletics. I would not advocate that at this time, ever. Or a middle school core position, I couldn't do it in good conscience. So I'm proposing that we eliminate the program and use those resources elsewhere. This is our enrollment. It's different looking at the middle and high school. We can't break out homerooms and average class size in the same way because obviously teachers teach different subjects throughout the course of the day. But this gives a 3-year look, last year, this year, and the projection for next year. The left-hand box is the middle school. So you can see this year we went up about 3 students overall in the middle school. If enrollment from the elementaries remains stable, we would go up another 3 next year, as next year's 6th grade group is slated to be larger, like this year's 6th grade group was. You can see that the high school has been relatively stable in that lower quadrant of the 300s and would continue to be so next year if this year's enrollment remains roughly in place. So the overall school is hovering right around that same mid 550 to 560 range. So here's some priorities. Again, I'm only kind of focusing on 2 areas, assuming we have athletics activities remaining in the budget next year or getting added into the budget, as well as maintaining the language teacher and anything else that was cut. Ed 306 is the bulk of what we would be asking for as priorities. We have a required by law business education program, and we've eliminated both of our teachers for that over the years. So adding one of those back would be something that would be required to look at. After looking at the need to continue to staff digital literacy, engineering and technology, and computer science at both middle and high school grade levels with only 2 teachers, it does not seem possible to do that. We've looked at the different configurations of courses we offer. Can we crunch? Can we squeeze? It cannot be done with our current staffing, so we're asking to restore back the position that was cut in this year's budget cuts under that required by law kind of category. Please don't cut anything else from the middle school and high school. We're already at the bottom of the funding barrel and doing as good of a job as can be done. And I don't know how we maintain programming if we don't maintain staffing. And because of the promoting only based on completing competencies, I think it would be irresponsible to not restore the summer programming to the middle and high school. This year, not having summer programming at either level has had a much bigger effect on the high school. Thankfully, again, we have teachers who are willing to give their time and tutor kids and try to get some credit recovery, but I have learners who are repeating classes because they missed one learning goal. And so now they're taking the entire class again. That is not cost efficient at all, nor is it good for that learner's time when they could have finished that thing over the summer and been done. And at the middle level, I'm highly concerned if we have learners who are only missing a couple of competencies, that we're going to retain them at grade level versus have them finish over the summer. Again, this seems like a no-brainer to me. It's cost-benefit analysis. The cost is relatively low. The benefit is extremely high. So I'm proposing that we restore the summer programming. And at the middle school core, we have Wit and Wisdom, which has been an excellent program, but it requires blocks. So that restricts teachers to 3 instructional periods during the course of the day at 90 minutes each. That's a tight schedule with only 1 teacher per grade level. Math instruction, to try to close some math gaps, we have also been teaching that in a block, which has had huge impact on our Ames Web scores already this year, as well as early SAS. But again, that's restrictive of our teachers' ability to move around and support different learner needs. Unfortunately, we have some math classes and ELA classes that have 26 or 27 learners and high percentages of learners with specific needs, and we can't move or adjust because of how tight the staffing has become. There's a reason we didn't put a middle school core cut on the table last year, but it was cut because of the budget cuts. We really need that back. It's having a hugely detrimental impact on a lot of kids in the middle school who are locked into restrictive schedules with classes that we can't adjust. So those are my priorities. Just some highlights from our budget outside those priorities. You'll notice that the book replacement line at the middle school is increased by $13,000. It was from a $0 to $13,000 in the general education area of the budget. This is due to the fact that the Wit and Wisdom and Eureka Math workbooks were previously purchased as a bundle when we onboarded the program, but we now need to purchase them yearly to make sure learners have them. So that's the cost for that piece. Middle school general education supplies will be proposed an increase of $3,000. Again, that's to purchase instructional supplies required for Wit and Wisdom outside of the consumables. Grade 6 and 7 salaries, you'll see the increase of 0.5 FTE in each. That's my request to restore that core position that was cut to those 2 grade levels. STEM construction salaries at the middle school level, you'll see an increase of 0.5 in the requested budget to restore half of the STEM teacher. The other half would be in the high school budget. Assuming athletics, it remains in the budget, there would be an increase of $1,300 in the athletic transportation line. That's because of the increase in the hourly rate by our contract with the transportation company. That's not an increase in the number of hours or runs. At the high school, you'll see the STEM construction supply line decrease by $13,000 due to the proposed elimination of construction trades. Some money has to remain in that line to support the STEM programming. You would see the FTEs at the high school level in that line decrease by 0.5. That's 1 going down for construction trades and a half going up for STEM. Athletic transportation at the high school would be increasing by $5,500. Again, the exact same number of hours or trips as this year, but at the 26-27 hourly rate. Some of the big increases, and this is where things cost more in the long run, and this goes back to Ruben's conversation around, and I think John's question about the open enrollment piece. This year already, you'll notice if you were to look at this year's budget, the vocational tuition line that's paying for kids to go to other CTE centers is already running about $35,000 higher than the approved budget. This is not a choice that our schools have. If individuals are accepted into a vocational program at another school that we don't offer here, we are required to provide them that access, and we are required to either transport them or reimburse their families for transportation if they transport themselves. So that has resulted already this year in $35,000 of cost going to mostly Keene High School and some to Conval. That's $35,000 higher than the $55,000 that we always spend in this area. And vocational transportation, I'm proposing a $50,000 increase, which will roughly match what we're anticipating spending this year because we added a 3rd bus run to Keene. We also have a family, just as an example, somebody's going all the way to Alvern in Hudson, and we are required to pay Hudson and transport or reimburse for transportation. So last year, we tried having the conversation around the benefit of housing a quality CTE program here where we're not only not paying other people, but collecting tuition. This is the opposite outcome that we tried to warn folks about last year. We are now already paying others for what we could have been collecting tuition revenue in, and we have no choice. If we don't offer the program here and a learner seeks access, we are required to give it to them and either transport them or pay their family to transport themselves. And then you'll see tuition, non-New Hampshire school increasing by a proposed $12,000, so we can maintain the advanced technical schooling electrical program that has had great success for the learners in that this year. Is this an efficient way to do CTE? No. However, I do think it's a more appropriate and sustainable way, given that we don't have the space or staff here. Overall changes at the middle and high school, I want to emphasize these are non-personnel changes. These are just the areas of the budget that are inputted by the school for other types of spending. The high school, you would see an overall increase in the non-salary lines of $109,077 over the fiscal year 25-26 adopted budget. $97,000 of this proposed increase is due to vocational tuition and transportation services. $5,500 of this is due to athletic transportation increases. I did make a note, even though this amount is $109,077 over this year's adopted budget, it is still $19,000 below the actual spending from fiscal year 24-25. Middle school, the overall non-salary increase would be $22,015 over this current year. $16,000 of this is due to the instructional program consumables coming into the general budget, and $1,300 would be due to the athletic transportation increases. And I'm noting that even though this is over this year's spending, it is still $24,000 below the actual spending in these areas from the previous school year. And that's what I've got.
Thank you. All right. Ruben, you have the athletics and co-curricular?
We're going to be putting the athletics and co-curricular with Heather on another meeting.
Okay. So you're
But the general, I mean, we've talked about it multiple times with the numbers. It's,
yeah, that's fine to wait.
yeah.
Okay, great. All right.
Chance
then-
for questions?
Yes, so we're going to open up to board questions now. Any public questions will have to wait for the public minutes, for the public comments toward the end of the meeting. So, John, you want to go first?
Sure, I just wanted to ask, David, you did mention a number of items relating to salaries. I know the two grade school programs were mostly relating to educational inputs, books, and curriculum and things like that. But I know that staffing obviously drives the largest part of your expenditures, and I just wondered whether the restorative classroom and other things that you do as an effort to address student needs, address the needs of students who have either physiological issues or maybe just emotional issues relating to adverse experiences they're dealing with. How is your funding for those kinds of staffing needs that address the student services? I guess that's what
So I would look to Jen Horn to continue this conversation when she's with us. Those programs at both RMS and JGS are funded through student services, through the student services line. And so those are not in the general fund, although they are reflected in our enrollment documents and our number of classrooms. At JGS, I know that it's differently embedded at RMS. So you'll see that documented there. 2 of those 18 classrooms are supported through student services, so the funding for that comes from student services. What I can say, I don't mean to speak for RMS, but all learners who are receiving additional supports through the ILC, the Intensive Learning Centers at both Jaffrey Grade School and Ringe Memorial School, it's very important for our students to remain included in their home schools if at all possible. And these opportunities through both RMS and JGS's Intensive Learning Centers, which we call the Restorative Classroom at JGS, enable our students to receive the services and supports that help them thrive within their home schools. so that we don't need to continue to explore the possibilities of out-of-district placement for learners at either location.
If I can add to that from a financial perspective, when I talked about the default budget being 1.5 million and those three items there being the primary drivers, typically a primary driver of the default budget is student services. And early indications would suggest that our student services will be flat, perhaps a little bit lower. So that will most likely not be a driver of increases in the default budget. Anything can happen. That, as we know, people move in and move out, so it can go either direction. If you do have an individual who moves in at an expensive placement, or two individuals, you can see that swing 150,000 to $500,000. So we know that can happen very quickly, and it can happen overnight. So, and it all depends upon the age of the individual and the types of services that are needed to be provided to that individual so that they can get what they do need. But right now, it would look like we're not, since actually putting into the restorative classroom, we know that we've estimated saving about $500,000 every single year for the last couple of years, and we're not adding to the out-of-district placement for that, for individuals who would qualify for that type of programming.
When you say that you
As of right now.
estimate
Yep.
having saved $500,000 each year, how does that work? What's the savings? How does it?
Sure. The savings, well, as you can see, just transportation alone increases. Like, so one bus going into a location is going to be anywhere between $45,000 to $50,000. So that transportation is part of the process. If it's a day placement, and then depending on the needs, it could be 65,000. It could be 150,000 on top of that. And so, if you look at the needs of individuals who have higher supports in the area of behavior or things, and then cognitively as well, or maybe some other needs, that's going to add money onto that. So being able to keep our learners here, first and foremost, is the best thing for them, best thing for their peers, best thing for their future, best thing for the longevity. Once you send an individual to an out-of-district placement, which maybe is the best thing for a student, we want to make sure that we're certainly not doing something that's not even what's needed for that individual. But the moment you do that, it is more likely that that learner will continue to be out-of-district placed throughout the course of their experience, which is going to cost more throughout the years. If they remain in our district and we're providing them what they need, and they're getting the social benefit from being with their peers, being in their community, and being seen as a positive contributor to their community, certainly there are some incredible non-monetary benefits from that, and that are long-lasting, but also, you're not compounding the high costs of out-of-district placements.
How do the intensive learning centers accomplish that? What is it that they do that prevent those out-of-district placements?
If I could pause for 1 second, I think that, because we're going to have Jen Horn coming to do a similar budget presentation for special education, I believe, right, Ruben?
Correct,
Yep.
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Would it be okay, John, if we paused that and simply focused on these schools?
Sure.
Even though they're all integrated, I get that.
Yep.
But Jen has so much of the data that we want when we talk about this. And so, she's so good at getting the numbers exactly right, that if it's okay with you, I'd like to pause.
I'm absolutely all right with that. The reason that I ask, though, I have to say, is because every time I do ask, I feel like I learn more about this, and it's such a big deal but I'm fine with leaving that for now.
If that's okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I think what I'd like to do is, because this was a massive amount of information, let's start down and we'll go ask each board member if they have any comments and questions, if that's cool. Charlie, let's start on your end. Do you have comments and questions for the principals and Ruben?
Not at this time. I think it was a good overview. I will have some detailed questions later on, but I think it did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy?
I agree with Charlie. It was a great presentation, very enlightening, well prepared, and I don't have any questions at this time, but thank you.
Okay. Joan, do you have other
No.
questions directed? Okay, Christine?
I do. And I'm looking at you, David.
I know it was coming.
I'm gonna take a break.
Yeah, I'm just walking.
You're gonna have to sell me on getting
I
rid of.
don't want to sell you on it.
Well, this is what I'd like to know. So right now, we are very fortunate that our students who are interested in construction trades can go to Keene. What happens to our students if next year their program is full? And there's no room for us.
That is always, yeah, and a program that we don't house, that is always a concern. And especially where Keene is not in our attendance area like Conval is. Even with Conval, that frequently happens. We get 25% of Conval CTE seats are reserved for Conant students. However, when a program has 36 seats, 25% is a relatively small number, so that does already happen. The sad thing for construction is that we have never had to experience that because we've housed the program here. So the answer is they would not have seats in Keene, and we would have to look elsewhere or find a different partnership for them. The only other thing I would add to that is us canceling the program here could, in theory, give an opportunity for Conval to add it there if they chose to do so. I don't advocate that because then, again, we're tuitioning kids to Conval for something we offered here. But that's another possible route that could go. I have no idea.
Have we, I know that our construction trade students, some of them have been involved, excuse me, in this electrician program, and that's been very positive, but in general, how do our students feel about having to take classes, construction classes in Keene? I mean, it's a long way, and that has to have an impact on their regular classes.
I have not seen a significant shift in how the individuals going to Keene are doing in their general classes. I know that the ride is longer, so that's tricky. However, the facility is significantly better than what they had here. I mean, it's not even close, right? I mean, Keene has an actual CTE center with actual fully prepared and articulated construction trade space and programming. So I have not heard any of the learners going to Keene complaining about being in Keene. The feedback from the teachers in Keene has been extremely positive. They love our kids. They say what we already know about them. They're kind, they're focused, they're diligent, they get excited to have them in class, but it's not here.
Yep.
And I've said this every year I've been the principal, that when we send our kids other places to do things we should be doing here, we run the risk of them becoming embedded into a different community, and that is absolutely already happening to some of the kids going to these far-off places, including Keene. You know, Benson Wood had a partnership with Keene's construction program. They might take some of our kids and hire them or give them apprenticeships that pull them into that avenue of the trades away from here. That's a real concern when we are sending kids to other communities to do the things we should do here, which is why I'm not going to try to sell you on this. I'm only telling you, when I'm forced to make a choice, this is the choice I would make. I don't think it's a good choice. I don't think I can staff the program. Those two things exist together, but I don't think it's a good choice.
And if Keene, for instance, went to open enrollment, then the students, our Conan students, who want to take construction trade at Keene may choose to enroll.
Yeah, and technically there's, even right now, if there's a course that a student wanted to take here, one of our students, but it conflicted with them going to the CTE course at Keene, they could take that course at Keene and we would be billed for that course as well. So we almost had this happen a couple of instances this year. We were able to make it work, but that means now if somebody can't fit their English class or their algebra class, and Keene says, oh, don't worry, they'll just take it here right before or after that course, that's another tuition bill that would get tacked on for those credits as well. These are all warnings that we try to give, and I know I'm saying this as a broken record, but it's important to note. I don't lie and I don't exaggerate. I was very transparent about the concerns, and this is what we're seeing now. So that is exactly a possibility, yes.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. I know this is a really long day for everybody. And Nikki, you talked about, I think you said that a third of your spending money, basically, education spending money is gone. What's the impact that's had on students, do you think? I mean, is it like, oh, look, we don't need that money anymore, or?
No. Some of it was put back in through, like our co-curriculars was put back in through the public hearing in August. Field trips will continue to happen because of the diligent hard work of a group of fifth graders from last year. And to quote a fifth grader from last year, they fundraised, they participated in the Ringe townwide yard sale, and raised a little bit over $7,000. And one of the fifth graders who was on student council last year, when asked why they would do that, knowing that they would be a sixth grader next year, said, I want the students who come through this school to have the same experience that I had. And so our students are experiencing less field trips, but they will take a field trip. Every student will take a field trip this year, thanks to the hard work of student council. We will likely not have an artist in residence program. We will not have authors come to visit us. Thankfully, there's a member of the community, I don't know if it's Jeffrey and Ringe or the wider Monadnock area, who has fully funded our Harris Center programming. Ruben spoke about this last week. And so, fortunately for our students, they are not feeling the pinch, but only because of the good graces and the kindness of the other people in the community who have come out and supported our school at a time of dire need. And so, but I don't think that that's a budget. I don't think that that's a budget calculation that we want to continue to say that we are not going to fund things that we think are essential and valuable, and then expect somebody else to pick up the cost, because it's not fiscally responsible. Somebody once said to me a long time ago that you budget for your plan, you don't plan for your budget. And so what we plan and what we hope for students is what is reflected in our budgets. We're budgeting for the experience that we want our students to have. We know it's what they deserve, and it also ensures that they have really rigorous, high-level, engaging instruction from pre-K through, in my case, 5th grade, but pre-K through 12.
I'm going to ask another question. So we've heard in presentations about the impact that some of this budget cuts have had on the staff, being short-staffed. David's talked about that there's no substitutes, and so teachers are almost afraid to answer their phones because they don't want to lose their prep time and to go in and substitute in another classroom, even though they will get compensated for it. I'm wondering, in the grade schools, what's the impact been? Like, what's the morale been this year with the budget cuts?
I have some RMS people in the audience that probably could speak to that a little better than I can, because they are truly the ones. I cannot speak with more vigor in that the staff at RMS have continued to move heaven and earth for students every day. I feel that we are having a particularly fantastic school year, despite some of the challenges that we have faced fiscally. I think that comes down to the passion and the drive of the educators that we have, and their commitment to students. I think it speaks to some of the priorities that we've put on here about the essential nature of the teams that we have, the support that they're giving to one another, the collaborative and collective way that they're working to figure out what is best for students and how to respond to that in really timely ways. I don't think that we've ever done the work that we're doing at RMS to as high a level as we are doing this year. But I think that's just what we do.
But is it sustainable? I mean, you're talking about how you're working, so how
Is
the
it? I think
teachers are leaning in. But
Is it sustainable? Yes. Is it sustainable under the current? If we continue to support education in Jaffrey Ringe with the dollar amount that we're doing it with this year? Absolutely not. No, I don't feel that it is. No, I don't think there's a nicer way to say it. No, I don't.
I mean, at Jaffrey Grade School, I have to echo Nikki's sentiments. We feel the same way at Jaffrey Grade School. We are so incredibly lucky to have the passionate and committed staff that we have. They show up every day, and they show up for our kids over and over and over again, well beyond the hours of the school day. And we are exceptionally grateful for them working with us and the work that they do for our children and with our families. And we're lucky that we did not lose more staff between last year with what occurred within our communities and this year. The JGS staff go above and beyond to meet the needs of our students, and they have not stopped doing that this year. They do it passionately because they know that the children that sit in our schools every single day deserve that. And so they show up for them every single minute of every single day and beyond. If the funding occurs to be reflective of what we experienced this past year, we cannot continue all of the work that we're doing if we lose that. And I would be concerned about the morale of staff that could result in losing exceptional educators who show up for our children if some of that culture deteriorates. But right now, I mean, I cannot express how incredibly proud we are of our elementary staff at both schools. They've showed up over and over and over again and continue to do so. And they question and they ask and they grow and they challenge each other, and they look at the kids in front of them and know that what they are doing is so important, and they are passionate about helping every child in both schools learn and grow. When they say all, they mean all. All of our children are all of our children.
And you didn't ask me, but there's a microphone.
I was
Obviously, I said this at the presentation I gave a couple of weeks ago, that I'll just repeat the exact same sentiment, but I'm not going to waste time with those exact words. We have, across the district, including at this middle and high school, incredible educators that the community doesn't maybe even know how good they have it with the teachers that they have here. And those teachers suffered a body blow this past year that shocked them. There's been, in the time I've been in this district, we've always had close calls. We've gone to default budgets. We've had pain. This was like, I don't even know, like 3 slaps across the face, 1 for each million that was cut. And the staff, I think because of the cultures we built, the care and love they have for our kids, we have incredible kids in our district, and the community has generally come back to the table for them. I think there's a sense of the community's going to have their back this year. I think that's the hope. That's what I've been hearing a lot of. They won't do that a second time. There's no way. They're going to realize that this was a mistake. My concern is if that does not bear out, the luck, which I don't think is luck so much as having amazing staff who care about what they do, that, I said this last week, that will run out. And it won't be the luck for the teachers, it will be the luck for the community that those staff have stayed. And, you know, it is not sustainable to have staff crisscrossing buildings, covering for each other. It's not sustainable having classes of 27 or 28 kids with 12 or 13 of those individuals needing specific support and not having the right ratio of special educators and paras to feed into those classmates. That's not sustainable. Our staff are doing a great job, but they are burning themselves out, and it's only November 3rd. So from my perspective, this is for the community to hear. Your teachers are kind of hoping and praying and believing that this wouldn't be a second year in a row of putting them through this pain. And I think that's why most of them have stayed, because they do care deeply about the work they do and they love their kids. But that is not enough to hold somebody here if their life is not sustainable because of the work that they've been forced to do without the right resources.
Chris, all good?
Yep.
Okay, Chris?
All yours.
Yeah, I just have a little bit to say. Actually, not too many questions, because I think you're all very clear in what you presented, but a few comments for everybody. And I guess first I'll just ask the board, I'm wondering, since, we didn't have public comments at the beginning, and I think our goal in inviting, encouraging people to come is to, get feedback. Maybe we could possibly have the public comments after our board comments versus at the
Why don't we
end.
do your, let me run the meeting, and
Yep.
you do your questions to the principals.
Okay.
And then we'll have the conversation with the consent agenda.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I guess, first off, again, I think it's very clear, the budgets were very reasonable and responsible. I don't think there's anything in there that's surprising. I think for people to note, some things that I took away, enrollment, we saw across the board, is relatively steady, right? I know there's a lot of rhetoric out there about, people fleeing the public schools, and certainly we have seen a decline since the COVID years, but we're looking at a relatively steady enrollment and class sizes that I think are reasonable, right? Some large, but I think when you look at, class sizes of, 14 to 20, that's where we want to be. That's where we've historically been. Again, I think that's, I don't see any reason to change that, I guess. I think the areas where we've added things, or you have recommended to add things, seem to be areas that will impact learning. I can see where you've kind of taken the mindset of the student. I think when we talk about these areas of deficiencies, like the middle school, like substitute teachers, like credit recovery over the summer, these are all things that, to me, very cost-effectively can improve the quality of the education that we give. I don't see them as extra things. I see them as current deficiencies that we need to address. And I see that in your thinking. The other thing is these new requirements for Ed 306. I think this is something as a board that we've seen time and time again. These laws are passed. They do come with additional costs. Sometimes, as David pointed out, we can, scramble and handle it. But eventually, a lot of these do come with costs. We don't get any extra money from the state for these requirements, and we are, the taxpayers ultimately, if we need to add staff, we need to meet these requirements. This gets, downshifted to the local taxpayers, which is fine. I think, I'm not expressing an opinion either way on the requirements. It's just that's the reality of what happens. And I guess what you said there, Nikki, lastly about, the fifth graders wanting, what the experience that they had. I think that my hope is that our community looks at it that way this budget season. I don't think that there's probably many people in this room that, went to a high school that didn't have sports, that didn't have language, that didn't have a drama program, that didn't have substitute teachers. I would hope that people would want that for the schools in our community. So thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll have many questions as we continue along, but appreciate it.
I have a question on the RMS preschool. For the enrollment, you have a projected enrollment of 84. Is that including the special education funded ones? So what's your estimate for the non-special education funded
So
classrooms?
So there can be students who receive special ed services in any of those 4 classrooms. 2 classrooms are funded through special education, so half of the placements are reserved for students with identified needs. So there can be 14 students in a section, so 7 of those are for students who have needs specialized instruction. And so our full day programs we typically have between 14 and 15 students. There may be identified students within that group too. So it really depends on the makeup of the group, the makeup of the students from year on year. But the 84 is year-end projections, not the beginning of the year, because of saving space for students as they turn 3.
Okay, and I guess where my question comes in is, in the current budget, we added preschool back in.
We added the 2 full-day classes at RMS and at JGS, so that was 4 classroom teachers and 4 paraeducators. The 2 classes, Ruben, could you pull that up?
Mhm.
I think it was on like slide 11 or 10 or somewhere around there.
We'll go find it.
So I guess what I'm thinking is, what is the amount that will, like, what is needed to be budgeted? Because right now it's not. So it's not part of the operating budget to have those. So
Yeah.
what needs to happen to put those back in, should we choose to do that?
4.
2 at RMS and 2 at JGS.
Okay,
4 classroom teachers and
4
4
paraprofessionals.
part-time paraeducators.
okay.
The 2 classes that says at the top, it says class 1, class 2, that says AM, PM in the box.
Mhm.
Those 2 classrooms are funded through special education, not through the general education fund. It's the 2 to the
Mhm.
right that are funded this year through the,
So in the projected budget, there are gonna have to be additional positions.
yes.
Okay, so this, when we do the line items, let's, like, when we get the nitty-gritty details, we want to just make sure to have those highlighted, that these are not operating budget positions, like, these are not default.
They
These
are not.
These
They are on the
are,
default.
yeah, so, thank you.
2 of our 6 preschool classrooms are in the default. Is that part of student services?
Student services, okay, thank you.
And those classes, just as a point of interest, the teachers of those classes have to be dual certified
Yep.
in
Yes.
order to teach those classes too.
Yeah. And to talk about the construction trades real quick again. So the numbers that we're spending now with transportation and tuition don't seem cost effective when we look at, like, those, just the numbers you put on the screen there. So hiring a person and doing the funding here does seem cheaper from what you showed us of the other things. But you're right, I know Monadnock's been looking for a construction trades person for a very long time, and they are using, like, this is something that can run out, because other schools are in the same position of, there's nobody coming forward.
And the reason, you're absolutely right, it's this, paying other schools to take our kids is never an efficient way to educate them. We have to pay extra costs to do that. So I'm not saying that this is a good move because in the long term it's gonna save money, but what I am saying is keeping the construction trades salary, benefits, supplies, equipment costs on the budget, and not hiring somebody and then being forced to pay all this extra money in transportation and tuition as well, that's where I think there's an issue, right? We have to think about, what are we gonna be able to support? I would love for you to keep both things on the books for me, and I'm happy as a clam, don't get rid of it. But I'm just saying, if I have to make a choice right now, I don't believe it's likely that we would fill that position and we would be maintaining a position on the books that we don't have and returning money to the taxpayers or using it for paying lots of tuition and travel anyway. So I agree with you. It's not, in my opinion, it's a horrific model for this program. I just don't see how we find a staff person who's willing to teach in this shop with this environment that we've created for them in the communities. I just don't see it happening. So I think it's, if we have to make choices, this is one to make. And in some ways, I think the community made it.
All right. All right. Anybody, I want to go back to people in case there was anything further the board wanted to add, or, no, we're good? Okay.
Lisa, is it okay if I comment?
We have a number of items going forward. I think Chris made the suggestion to move the public comments forward in light of their time, but also the principal's time, should questions need to be answered. Is there a motion to adjust the consent agenda to move public comments number 2 to now.
I would make that motion.
Thank you, John. Is there a second? Thank you, Charlie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, great. All right, so for the public comments portion, please refer to your paper for how we have our norms as far as moving forward. We also have our policy. If you scroll down and open up the policy, please, Ruben. This policy follows norms very closely. It is longer to do. And you will need to use a microphone. Hang on. Deanna traveled over here. Your sneeze has traveled. All right, and so do we have members of the public in person who would like to speak to these items? The one piece, if we do have financial pieces of it, we do need those in writing so that we have a few minutes to have them be pursued and, figured out without a quick random answer. Okay. Okay. We have one, Alex?
Oh, sorry.
You have the mic.
Alicia Stennerson, Jaffrey. I just wanted to thank you, Chris, for pointing out in terms of the Ed 306 that while the state has required a significant amount of increases in their expectations in terms of what schools are offering for students, they have not provided any financial resources in order to support that. So I appreciate you pointing that out. I did have a follow-up question out of curiosity, and I'm not sure if this can be answered or not, but I'm wondering if charter schools are required to follow the Ed 306 updates.
Public charter schools are public schools. My understanding is that they would have to follow underneath that as well, but I hadn't really actually asked that question or thought about it. They do take the state assessments, they do have that accountability, they are funded at a higher rate than than public schools are right here from, depending on how you look at it, of course. I'll have to research that one, but I believe they are. Although they don't have the same requirements in a lot of other areas, actually, from like certification of teachers and so forth, not so.
That's part of why I was wondering,
Yeah.
because I know that their requirements tend to be different, and this is a significant update, so.
Mhm.
We have somebody else?
Jennifer Chung, Ringe, New Hampshire. So I work in the district, but I'm going to speak as parent. I have a child that's attending the CTE course in Keene. She absolutely loves it. However, my child does have some learning needs. She is spending over an hour on a bus ride to and from. She does not have academic studies. Her time for her services tend to be limited and perhaps not at the most optimal times. I guess just speaking as a parent, I am grateful that she is able to attend the CTE. She is thriving. She shows so much pride in her work that she has done.
Mm.
However, as a parent, I am very concerned about her ability to continue with the academics she does have here. And I just really wish that many of the people from previous meetings had shown some foresight and some compassion and empathy for what our students might be going through at this point in time.
And we have a couple people behind you.
Carlene Walter from Ringe. I just had a question regarding the transportation on the CTE program. You said that was a significant cost. Is that a school bus that you send students over on? It doesn't sound like it's very many, so it's a full-size school bus. Is there another alternative we could use that would maybe be more cost efficient? That's just a thought that came to my mind.
Am I permitted to answer
You
these
can
questions?
take that one.
So we have a contract with our bus company that necessitates that our first transportation option is always the bus company. If they are unable to provide transportation, we can use a different source. The different sources are not typically significantly less expensive. For example, the school bus that we send, whether it's big or small, is the exact same rate with the bus company. And the same holds true. We've worked with other organizations like Thomas Transportation and things like that, and the hourly rates tend to be relatively similar. When we use our bus company, the cost is fixed regardless of the amount of time of the CTE run, for example. But if we send, say, Thomas Transportation or a taxi, it's not fixed. It's based on the actual time out of garage and back into garage for the organization that we're working with. So we have not found a significant cost savings doing it outside the bus company. It's actually tends to be a higher cost because we have to piece things together when that happens. And then, of course, if we're unable to provide transportation, we have to pay the family a reimbursement rate that's set for that purpose. So, of course, we would continue to look at areas to do that, but that's part of a bigger conversation around our transportation contracts and who's available in the local community to provide that transportation, who also meets the very stringent requirements of the Department of Education, which you can't just throw a kid into any taxi cab. They have to have specific credentialing and background checks and things like that as well. So.
And I think there was one more person behind you.
Aaron Quinn, Ringe. I just wanted to make a comment on something that was mentioned about the sustainability of the amazing teachers amongst the three schools. And just I really hope our community can bounce back and really support the children and the teachers. It's been an amazing year so far, and really appreciate all that these educators are doing for my children and all the other children in this community. And I think it's really important that we all take into consideration where we are right now and take into consideration what the students and teachers are going through and how amazing the support our children are getting from these educators despite the shortfalls that this community has put upon them.
Is there anybody online that wanted to comment?
No public online, but Sandy wanted me to remind you she is online.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I didn't get a message back from her that she was planning on voting tonight, so I didn't realize. I'm not sure, is that possible tonight?
Yeah,
To
she's-
have her
she's
part of
ready to
the
go. Yeah.
meeting? Okay. All right. We will
I did
include
let you know, Lisa, I did let you know that I was going to be remote.
Next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have manifests, payroll. We have a donation from Mountain Shade LLC for a light pole base in the amount of $850. The nomination for a short-term Joffrey Grade School nurse, and acknowledgement of receipt of the stipend list. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Yes, I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Great, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Judy. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda?
Yes. I would just like to thank Mountain Shade for their donation. I think that all of the companies that have donated to the district over the years really deserve our recognition and our thanks. And Mountain Shade has been a real regular on that. I know they contribute to the Interact trips on a regular basis and many other things. So, yeah, just want to mention that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? And because Sandy is online now, we have to do that differently. Charlie?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Christine?
Yes.
Chris?
Aye.
Sandra?
Aye.
Thank you. And I say aye. Motion passes 7-0-0. Thank you, Sandy. then we have the minutes for the, let's do these separately. So the amended minutes for the October 6th meeting. Please take a look and see if you are here for that. Is there a motion to accept the minutes for the October 6th meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Judy. Any discussion? All in favor? We'll do it by roll call, sorry. Charlie?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Sandy?
Aye.
Thank you, and I say aye. Passes 700. On to the minutes for the October 20th public meeting. Take a look, make sure everybody was here. Is there a motion to accept the minutes for October 20th?
So moved.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Judy. All in favor? Charlie? Were you, let me see,
Abstain.
abstain? Okay. And then Judy?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Christine? Aye. Chris?
Aye.
Sandy?
Aye.
Aye. And I say aye. Vote passes 601. Action items and approval to expend funds for the, from the Arthur Daniels Fund towards stadium field athletic facilities. Who would like to speak to this? Do you want to speak to that, Ruben, or do you want David to?
Well, I'll speak to it, and David can add if you'd like to. Basically, we've been doing some work down at the field, that area. We've been trying to get internet down there for quite some time. Mike Cotton has successfully been able to negotiate that, and we will be having internet down there. A lot of this has to do with communication and safety, and we haven't actually even had a landline down there. If you go down there, we have a landline now. There are some other things that we're putting in place, one of which is a camera system so that we have a more sustainable way. Well, actually, right now, for the field, it would be really the only practical way, but a sustainable way to be able to televise our events with a company that is going to install the cameras. The post that was donated by Mountain Shade is what that would be going on, and that post is large enough, strong enough so that along with the Wi-Fi and along with the electrical wiring and the conduit and everything that we're putting in place, will be able to be used in the future for also putting some outside speakers there so that we have a better way to communicate with everyone, certainly for fun purposes and for clarity purposes, but also in the case of an emergency that everyone would be able to have clear instructions, which that is not possible at this point in time. So a lot of it is safety, and then the rest of it, the reason is for functionality and to improve the experience that's down there. And then, David, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, so the reason why this particular work is being requested from the Arthur Daniels Fund is that fund is earmarked. It's not a budget item, it's not coming from taxpayer resources, but it's designed for the improvement of athletic facility. So we decided that these two items fell nicely within the scope of that fund. And the other piece of this, in addition to providing, so there's the safety components which have been funded now, that's the landline, the internet, all those pieces. Those should have been done forever ago, but that's done. This is designed to improve, like Ruben said, the access for families and others to see these events, but it's also a long-term fundraising venture for the athletic programming. This organization, NFHS, so this is the initial cost of purchasing the camera and having it installed. But once that's done, they then will live stream these events and raise money from individuals who want to have access to this. And that a portion of that then comes back into the school to support athletic programming. So it's become a revenue stream for some of the long-term sustainability of improvements for athletics over time. So that's part of the reason why we chose to do this now, while we were already doing the safety work that had to be done. So that's why it's in this fund, and that's the longer-term kind of vision for how this can work.
Is there a motion to accept the expenditure from this fund toward funding the athletic facility upgrades?
I make that motion.
Christine, is there a second? Second. For any further discussion?
I am so grateful. I've been down to the lower field when there's been a variety of athletic events at the same time, and there's been injuries. And I've said this before in this meeting, I watched Heather Lindstad jump over the chain link fence, running jump over a chain link fence to get to a kid who had fallen while running, right? So I am so grateful that now someone can pick up their cell phone and call, or she can call the landline, use the landline and call for an ambulance, because I know some people get self-service there. I do not. So I'm very grateful. We've needed this. We've talked about it for a long time, and it's been difficult to get, and so I'm grateful that this work is happening. And if for some reason we don't have athletics, I believe that this is still necessary because we use our fields for PE, and we have the community that uses these fields on a regular basis, uses our track. I don't know if they use any other parts of our fields, but certainly our track is well used, so I'm grateful for this.
And we tentatively have that slated to be fixed in May. By fixed, I mean redone. So.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Charlie?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Sandy?
Aye.
And I say aye. Vote passes 7-0. On to the approval of the revised school board calendar. This was something that we discussed at the past few meetings. Charlie, you were not here at the last meeting, so we did not vote on this. I wanted to wait until you were here because you had concerns on it. So I just wanted to have the full vote together. Hoping you'd be here tonight. So what this calendar is our future budget meetings. We've chosen, again, to have them all be part of our main board meetings, although in the past they were always open to the public. It kind of felt like there was a much more insular group going. By doing it this way, we're hoping to become far more inclusive of our community. A note that next week, just for next week, we also changed the meeting time to 6 p.m. to accommodate this kind of large information session. We are planning on having them all here in the high school lobby, with the exception of on January 15th, the RMS cafeteria. It doesn't show which part of that was. And so any further discussion on the calendar? Okay, seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Charlie?
No.
Judy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Christine?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
And I say yes. Vote passes 6-1-0. On to discussion items. Are there any board discussion items? Other than the kind of board matter things? Were any committees meeting? We have a policy meeting this coming Thursday, coming right up. I will say for that meeting, I have pretty much nothing because of what I'll tell you in the New Hampshire School Board Assembly update. So we might decide to postpone that meeting unless people have things, but we'll talk more about that. So no further discussion items? All right. In the board matters, we had actually, this was an incredibly busy couple of weeks as far as community meetings. Really powerful stuff happened in our community this week. I'll begin with mine. The School Board Assembly for the voting went along all of your School Board Association lines, except there were so many edits in the in each item, that the groups kept coming together, the different school board people offering these warrant articles kept coming together and conglomerating them and then streamlining them so that each one went down to like one sentence, like just getting all the language out. It was a wild ride. I gotta say, it was a wild ride. So you can look up on it'll all be posted soon, but that was pretty wild. What they did do, instead of having the school district that won School Board of the Year, usually they come and speak, which is what I spoke for last year, because we got it. This year, they didn't have that school board attend. Instead, they had somebody come to talk about how to run meetings and how to have the community get involved. And 90% of this meeting was make norms, put it on your agenda, and have it printed off every meeting. And it was so fun. It was just like exactly what we had just done. Like, you guys need norms. These are what your norms should be. And I took a picture of it. Their norms followed what we wanted so closely. Like this is something that we're not alone in dealing with at all. This was something that the School Board Association said everybody needs a reminder. Set norms. Have your school board be able to come together in unity, disagree respectfully, and have the community hear it and be part of that discourse. And it was very powerful. It was kind of neat to see that for as much struggle as we've had this past year, we are aligned, not only with other districts, but we're aligned in a progressive, constructive way of moving forward. And it was kind of exciting to see that. So, any specific questions on the School Board Association? Cool. The other meeting that I went to this week that a number of you guys also went to was the fair funding meeting, which they needed 40 people to sign up. They got 80 people to sign up, and 120 people showed up. And it was incredible. And there was some really, really good discussion back and forth. Does anybody else want to speak to that particular meeting?
And just to clarify, that's the one that was at RMS?
Mhm.
Okay, because there was another one that I heard people had gone to as well. Was it?
Jeffrey Women's Club.
Yes,
That's
that
different.
one.
That's coming too.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. Anyways, the fair funding was really, really good. It's a great website to follow. I thought that the data that they gave was spot on for what we'd been seeing, but also put together in a way that was extremely accessible, and kind of threw me for some loops when they talked about how New Hampshire funds things, and it was interesting. So good data. And then on last Thursday night, I believe it was, the Jaffrey Women's Club hosted the League of Women Voters. And the League of Women Voters have these listening sessions. And they had a listening session where they invited 7 of our local representatives, senators and representatives, to come across all aisles and talk specifically about school funding and how taxation is used in that, and how and the Supreme Court's decision. And 6 of the 7 invited showed up. And it was wild. And this was packed too. I think it had about 60, maybe 70 people there. And just to be able to hear all the representatives be able to speak their mind about where they stand with this, and where they stand with an open enrollment. And they didn't really speak about open enrollment as much as charter schools. That was a really big piece. But to have the public be able to get up and say, here's what we're concerned with. How will you fix this? Where's the accountability? Where's your responsibility? And to hear their responses. Now they said that this was recorded. I haven't seen it yet where it can be found, but please try to find it, because their responses were truly important to hear as far as what the direction that we want to go in, the direction the state is intending to go in. The legislation coming down the pike is going to put this year with Ed 306 to shame. It's really, what's coming is pretty much looks like a tidal wave of legislation to continue this movement against public schools. And the reasoning behind it was really fascinating. Like, they really believed this was right. So it was good to hear. It's really good to hear all these sides. The way that puts into our policy meeting is that I asked our, Barrett Christina is the executive director of the New Hampshire School Board Association. He's in charge of, he's not the president, but he's in charge of a great deal of it, and especially in charge of a lot of the policy making. We haven't seen our normal fall policy updates, which is what we should be working on right now. And I asked him about it when I was at the delegate convention, and he said the reason is that so far they have more than 40 because of all the changes in Ed 306. They did a bunch that we had this summer. Remember, we had 22 this summer. Right now they have another at least 40. They're hoping to be able to break those up into small groups, but they are also tied together. And so we will be having some important policy meeting decisions to make, but right now it's very silent because they're still trying to piece it all together. And what that means to me is that none of these are going to be recommended or optional. There's a lot of requirements coming down. So it's something that we're going to be watching for. So.
Yes, and at the League of Women Voters listening session, there were many significant things said, and the legislators all had a chance to express their opinions, but there were two things I thought worth mentioning. One is local Representative Dick Ames, who's been in the legislature for, I think, a dozen years, maybe more. This is his last term, and he has worked on school funding issues for a long time. He has a bill out, I wish I had the number here, but it's very well thought out, and it's to try to address the state funding of education, which he and others believe something will happen this year because of the recent Supreme Court decisions in favor of Conval's suit. So they do believe that there's a good chance the legislature will do something. We don't know what. And Representative Ames has put together a very thoughtful bill on that, and he presented copies of it there at the session. And I think it's worth noting that Representative Hunt also had a proposal. It's one he claims he's put forward before, and I'm sure that he has. And his proposal was that the statewide property tax should be the way to fund education, not a sales tax or an income tax, but that the statewide property tax should not be returned to the wealthy towns who already have low tax rates, but rather those monies would be collected by the state and distributed equitably among the needier communities. So those are just a couple of proposals that I wanted to mention.
All right. Okay, the last piece, School Care Coalition. We had an invitation. School Care is our risk management pool for our insurance company. And if you listen to the previous school board meeting, Ruben went into some detail about the issues that have come to light with a sudden increase in cost and a projected increase next year. And I did, at the School Board Association, this featured heavily, and they did have a special meeting aside afterwards. And from that meeting afterwards came an invitation. They, from Lebanon school districts particular, but many school districts are signing off on stuff like this. They would like to find a way to hold school care accountable, and that could go to legislative action. And they are looking for school boards to support right now, there's no formal sentences. Right now, it is, are you willing to put your name as a school board that is basically petitioning school care to say, where did these numbers come from, that was a big piece of it, like very little information about how we got this number to pay back, while this school district had this number to pay back. Very little transparency in that, and so that's where they want to start. Tell us how you got these numbers. Why did it come about so quickly when 6 months ago you're assuring the Secretary of State that everything's hunky-dory and aren't we better than Health Trust? I said that I would just bring it to the board. Every once in a while, we might be a politically active board and join things, but other times we simply watch, and as in the Conval decision. So we did not participate in that, and the board had their reasons for that. Does the board wish to, at this point, be part of a petition to ask school care to be accountable? John, do you want to speak to it, or you?
Yes, I would like to speak to it. I'd just like to say, I think that at the very least, we should join in asking for accountability on that. For one thing, school care, if I understood correctly the presentation, is trying to reimburse themselves for 2 years of miscalculations. So how did they go 2 years before they realized that their expenses were exceeding their revenue? Second to that is the thing that you just said, Lisa. How did they arrive at those numbers? Are those numbers, can they be supported? And in particular, what right do they have to say that we not only have to pay, but we have to start paying interest if we don't pay by a date given? I mean, I think there's some accountability questions that should be asked and answers obtained.
And I agree. I think we should find out what we can and everything he just said.
Okay. All right, Christine?
I'm happy to find out more. I'd like to see what the petition says.
See language, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually was just scrolling through to see if they had added any, and there is no language yet. It's simply to see, this is a feeler. Are districts saying they want to bother with this?
Yeah, it's $500,000. It's shocking amount, and it will have an impact on our ability to get our budget passed, frankly. So I would like to know as much information as possible so that we can convey that to our taxpayers.
Okay. All right. Chris is in. All right. Any further comment on it? Okay. Sandra, are you here?
I'm still here.
Okay. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that we should sign on to the petition because they should have come up front with, they have to be reporting somehow on what they're doing.
Yeah. All right. So before I take the vote, I have the letter. I'll just read it out. It's a short thing so you can hear kind of a little more specifically, and then we'll take a vote on it. Hi everyone, I connected with some of you at the Delegate Assembly, but for those of you who weren't there, I want to let you know that our district, SAU 88 in Lebanon, has consulted with legal counsel, and we are interested in gathering together a coalition of districts interested in working towards more transparency from school care with regard to these latest unexpected assessments. Specifically, we would like to see more information about how the assessment amounts were determined, whether or not these funds are meeting immediate needs or building future reserves, and the portion of funds going to each if the funds are indeed being used for both, and the likelihood that we will see additional assessments in the future. At this point, we are considering writing letters and having pointed conversations between lawyers, but we could also be moving toward additional legal action if our questions do not get answered. If your district would be interested in joining such a coalition or in learning more about doing so, or has additional questions you would like to see answered, please reply to me, and I will add you to our list of interested parties. Many thanks for your time. Fair enough? Okay, so let's do a vote of, I don't want to say, yeah, I guess we can say joining a coalition. We'll join it. It's not going to commit us to signing petitions or legal action or money. We're going to join this investigation. Okay?
And support this statement.
Okay. All right. So Charlie?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Sandra?
Aye.
And I say aye. Passes 7-0-0. And thank you, Lebanon, for putting that together. All right. And on our agenda, does anybody else have any other board matters? Okay. All right. Then we will have a final motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Judy. Charlie?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Sandra?
Aye.
Thank you, and I say aye. Passes 7-0-0. Thank you, guys. Have a good night. See you at 6 p.m.
Thank you, folks.